Right, to our discussion, the Francophonie summit that was held on the 29th and the 30th. It just concluded today, and after that, or just right starting today, there will be a kind of business forum that is, of course, after the official summit. I have with me for discussion here His Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Anis Salem, member of the Egyptian Council for Foreign Affairs. We thank you very much for joining us.
Good evening. How are you?
And we just want to understand the significance of this particular summit and Egypt's participation with a high-ranking delegation there.
Well, the Francophonie has been around now for many years. This is the 15th summit. It's seen several Secretary Generals. It has gone through a phase of expansion. You have something like 57 member states now, with another 20 with observer status. So it is becoming a forum that has a contribution to make on the international scene. Now, at the same time, there is tremendous skepticism in the world about meetings like this one. People have seen meetings come and go. They see the General Assembly, they see the non-aligned group, they see regional groups in Southeast Asia, in the Africa context. And the question has become, how can these groups become more relevant and deliver concrete outputs and results? And I think what we're seeing here is that there is an attempt to move into a different phase. And it's happening at 3 or 4 different levels. The first one is the move from talking about culture to talking about economics, and trying to talk about that there is room for some role for the Francophonie in terms of economic development, in terms of larger markets, in terms of innovation, in terms of partnerships, investments, and so on. That's one big shift. The other 2 things that are with us is the problem of governance in Africa, and it's significant that there was an emphasis in a lot of the speeches on the issue of legitimacy and respecting the terms in office of heads of states. And this has been a problem with Africa for some time. It seems to have come back in many ways. And there's another issue, and that was really the focus of or the title, the formal title of the meeting, and that is the focus on women and youth.
Yes.
And that is that Africa has a tremendous legacy, really, of problems with the status of women in terms of women's mortality levels, women's health standards, their nutrition standards, the same for children. So some of this has to be cleaned up as Africa moves into a different phase. It's also, and this is the final transition, it also is a time when a new Secretary General has been elected, and she comes from Canada, and she is a woman, so it's the first time in the history of the organization.
It's relevant to the theme, the main theme of this conference, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So yes. I think there are transitions, so we can say that we hope that it will not be business as usual. We hope that there will be really a new phase where we will see some concrete outputs. But
maybe if it tends to be economic, why should it be not? I mean, here, what would we lose? In fact, it's a gain. I mean, here...
If there are concrete outputs, the thing is, how does an organization really prove itself relevant to the challenges that the countries are facing?
And hence, I need you, Seb, to just explain the difference between an organization like the Francophonie and the other blocks, African blocks like the ECOMESA, the IGAD, and others. And is there any kind of relevance between all these, or can they be all united? Can we see a kind of unity between all blocks? I'm not speaking, I know that the ECOMESA, the IGAD, and others are African, pure African, while the Francophonie are the French speakers, so it's not relevant, or it's not just blocked on Africa, but it is held here in Africa.
So this conference is in Africa, but it has been held elsewhere. The first one was in Hanoi.
Yes, yes.
So it rotates.
But this continent is filled with countries of French speakers, because they were colonizing them. We've just heard what the French President François Hollande spoke yesterday about Burkina Faso and what he is seeing of human rights and...
He talked about the issue of governance, that,
Yes.
that there have been instances where leaders have changed constitutions so they could extend their rule. And as you know, this is an issue in Africa for some time. But back to your first question in terms of the relationship between regional organizations and global organizations. The difference is that the Francophonie is based on a cultural notion. It's not based on geographical proximity. So when you talk about the Arab League, you're talking about a belt of countries that are neighbors already. They speak a common language, they have a common heritage and so on. And it's the same when you look at, say, any other geographical group. So the big challenge here is that you have a group that is mainly, nominally, sharing a culture. But in fact, when you look more closely, even in that group, it's not all of the countries are French-speaking.
Yes.
Not even the majority of countries in the Francophonie are French-speaking. So it's a little bit of a challenge. It's a far-fetched idea. A lot of people, when the Francophonie was born, were very skeptical about this. And it's very interesting to read the memoirs of one of the Secretary Generals from Egypt, Dr. Boutros Ghali. He expands a lot on the way he tried to expand the Francophonie beyond the French-speaking countries and the context and how he created a network with other organizations. So this challenge has been there. Whether the organization can survive, it will survive to some extent because you have a big country like France behind it. And there is a lot of enthusiasm for French culture. But when you look 10, 20 years down the road, you will need to ask yourself, what are the concrete outputs that came from this?
In fact, I want to ask what exactly is the aim of such an organization? I mean, for the initiation of such an organization in the first place. I mean, here, is it culture and purely culture? Then what are we speaking about here?
Well, the idea is, with the Francophonie, to some extent also the Commonwealth. It's the closest thing because the Commonwealth is a group of English-speaking countries, mainly linked because they were ex-British colonies. The idea is that there is a set of values, a set of cultural notions, and these values go into things like law, for example. If you look at, the French Code Napoleon, it is a very important instrument that has influenced a lot of countries, including Egypt. So there are some common areas that relate to culture, education, law, etc., that you can start with. Now, the question is, can this be translated into something else? Common value systems in terms of governance, but also common markets and possibilities for cooperation in economic enterprise. This is a question where the jury is still out. We don't know. We'll have to wait and see. What you can say, if you look at Africa, is that a lot of the African countries have entered a new phase of rapid economic development. Now we're starting to see the beginning of what we can say, or what we can call, African tigers. Countries that are growing at rates of 7, 8, 9%.
Like South Africa, for instance.
South Africa, Kenya, some of the other. There is a common currency between a whole group of countries in West Africa. It's South Africa plus several of its neighbors as well. So there is a feeling that there is hope and that there are possibilities for economic development. And this is new for Africa. We know that the classic image of Africa has been a continent that is suffering from famine and disease. And we were reminded of this with the Ebola outbreak. So Africa really wants to shed this old image and move into something new.
Right. If I may speak here about the Francophonie as an opportunity for Egypt to show its openness to the world through culture, through reforms that it has been carrying out with. What was the significance of Egypt's participation particularly this year?
Well, I think Egypt, as we progress internally in terms of implementing the the roadmap towards the future. I think as you come to certain milestones, you are really re-engaging with the outside world, becoming more dynamic, more focused on some of the issues that are of interest to you. And you have to put this into a longer and a wider perspective, because Egypt has been always a founding country in a lot of these organizations. It has played a very dynamic role in them. As I said, we had the Secretary General of the Francophonie. We've had excellent relations with Paris. The President was just in Paris recently, and I think that has a lot of significance. That
exactly. And
one of the few countries that he visited over the last period of time since he was in
the first two European countries for him were
yes,
Italy and France.
Yes, so that's significant. And it tells you something. So there is an interest, there is a relationship. Again, the issue is how to translate this into concrete terms. Of course, there are very immediate issues when we say, as you were mentioning, Egypt's bid for the membership of the Security Council.
For an instance, yes.
That is a very specific thing. I tend to think that we would have lobbied for this in other forums as well. It wasn't waiting for the Francophonie. Francophonie is just an occasion to meet. But we will definitely be lobbying in other fora. We will lobby in the UN, we will lobby outside the UN, and the nature of the lobbying process is that you go through a cascading process.
Yes, but another thing that Egypt can promote and is in need of support is terrorism. And it is particularly focused on culture. I mean, here ideologies and cultures and radical culture spreads. So I guess, how do you view Egypt's propagating this threat?
Well, let's remember that the issue of terrorism now is a shared issue for several African countries. It's not for Egypt alone.
And it's not just Africa, it's the whole world. We're speaking here about a threat to the whole world.
In Africa there is this particular dramatic aspect to it.
Indeed.
You know, Boko Haram in Nigeria, we have the Lord's Army in Uganda, we have the recent incidents in Nairobi. The Shabab group there is I think that's part of the Egyptian message in this meeting and elsewhere, that terrorism needs to be tackled not only specifically when it appears under the name of Daesh or Qaeda or whatever, but it has to be seen as a movement that has to be stopped, and there is a lot of interaction between the different parts of the movement, and there is an ideology, as you very rightly said, there is an ideology that is behind this. And I think this was part of the Egyptian message in Dakar this time. Again, I have to say that there is a need to come with concrete outputs. You need mechanisms, you need work plans, you need military plans. You have to translate this into action. I am not enthusiastic when I see declarations. I don't buy that. I think you have to go towards concrete results, because public opinion now is very much aware and skeptical about this kind of lip service approach. You need to have concrete mechanisms. You have to tell me on the ground how is going to follow up on this, who is going to do what are the military and intelligence capabilities that are going to be mobilized. That's the concrete outputs that are needed, and we're not there yet.
So exactly what did you expect, or what did you really want from this summit?
Personally? No, I think I'm very happy to see the transition towards focusing on economics rather than culture. I would like to see this translated into concrete terms, that you have to have a framework that you're working with, and you have to create some mechanism. You have to have either a funding organization, you have to have a serious money to invest, you have to have some milestones in terms of facilitating the transfer of investments and opening new enterprise, empowering young people, giving them the skills they need to engage in the market. These are big challenges, and it won't happen by simple declarations.
It won't happen by simple declaration, but it would happen if such gatherings would really find a real action on the ground.
That's the hope, exactly. That you have to translate this into an action plan.
And that occurred in this
well, we haven't seen it yet, and we haven't seen it in previous meetings either. I think there is and this is why I'm saying there is this skepticism about these kind of meetings, that the public, if you look on the net today, you don't find a single story about the Dakar meeting. And the reason is that it's not being seen as an important meeting globally. The media in the world is not holding its breath because of this meeting in Dakar. And I think this skepticism has to be addressed, because otherwise the whole business of diplomacy and politicians is going to lose its relevance. You have to be able to say at the end of the day that out of this we achieved 1, 2, 3. And this is where we used to be, and this is where we are now. And I think this is yet to be proven. It hasn't happened yet.
So I guess what we should be waiting for is this very important summit that will be taking place here in Egypt of 3 important blocks. That would be the COMESA, the EAC, and of course the third is the SADC. That would have some importance.
I mean, all of this is going to be useful in terms of mainly these kind of organizations are useful in terms of softening trade barriers. That's it. In other words, that the wall that does not allow your produce to go and get sold in another market lowers. Now that means that you still have to produce something. We have had a problem, and let me. It's good that you asked this question. We have a problem that the Egyptian exports are not really very big, so they're not really competing globally. The capacity of the Egyptian economy to export is limited. So when you look at the total trade of Egypt with the whole of Africa, you talk in the best years when it really made a shift, which was 2010, 2011, it was $2 billion. Now just to put that into perspective, the trade of China with Africa now is $250 billion. And the trade of India with Africa now is around $50 billion. And if you're looking at Turkey, because Turkey just had its own meeting with a group of African countries, Turkey is somewhere at about $22 billion, and the target for next year is $50 billion. So just so we know, because I hear us a lot, we talk a lot, and the talk becomes a substitute for action. And we don't talk in terms of concrete numbers. And we need really to look at the numbers very carefully and very seriously and say, okay, if we really want to become a factor in economic development in Africa, what are we going to do to move from a trade level? It's not only a trade level, by the way. It's also what are you exporting and importing. If you're importing now $300-400 million worth of petroleum products from Nigeria, that's not really trade.
Just let me have this report before we start with economy here. We will have, of course, this report on the Francophonie Economic Forum that will be taking place today and tomorrow in Dakar, and we'll come back for discussion.